I can't tell you how much I appreciate, all of you coming in and so many other great photojournalists here to see these two masters. So we all really, really do appreciate that. And we're going to be doing this tonight and tomorrow night. Tomorrow night we have Ethan Swope and Sean Cedat. They'll be presenting. I want to thank our sponsors, which is Pro Photo Daily, Epson, Photo Shelter, and American Photography. Thank them. And with that, tonight we have David Butow, and to start us off, we have Mark Edward Harris, who's going to be presenting first. So off you go. Again, thank you all so much for coming, and here we are. All yours, Mark.
Okay. I'm going to try to move myself over to the side. Oh, it doesn't matter. I know what it looks like. Okay. So here we go. So my story is kind of strange in ways because I had previous commitments to other things and I was a little bit slow in my response time, and I wasn't thrilled with that. But what I did the first day when I didn't find out till later that the fires were going on. So I live in Park La Brea. I went to the highest tower that had a view, and I got this establishing shot of the fire. I used a 400 2.8, a Nikon with a 5 point with a telextender built into it, and got this. So I think it actually is a very useful shot to give a sense of where it was in relation to Hollywood. But then the next morning I got out early. I set the alarm early and I made my way down Sunset Boulevard and was just, as anybody covering this was just amazed at the distances. I don't know how many of you, of course, all of you have been to LA, but how many of you were actually out here? But the distances that the fire um, spread was incredible. It was marching at one point close to the 405, and it was all the way to the beach, and then up the coast, up past deep into Malibu, and then of course Altadena. And so got that. This is the morning, and the winds were so strong, and you can see in this photo. And so above the firemen, these palm fronds were falling, and some landed on the truck, and some hit the firemen, and so it was really chaos at that time.
And Mark, as you're going through the neighborhood, is there any control, or just everyone's, like you were able to get anywhere you needed to, anywhere you wanted to go?
Well, there were already roadblocks, but with my LAPD press pass, I could move around.
Okay. And,
Uh,
and,
but,
there's- and there's somebody there at those barricades already?
oh yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
oh yeah, yeah. No, very quickly they were stopping traffic on Sunset, and so you could only get through with the LAPD media pass. Then you could see the frustrations along the way. In this image, they had no water pressure. And
Hmm.
so so here's a house burning, and they're just sitting there waiting for water. And so that was a real issue. I mean, can you imagine being a fireman or firewoman, and you're sitting there ready to go, try to stop this house and try. And the key thing, what they ended up doing when they finally got water pressure back, is to keep it from spreading. And this happened all the time to the house, to the left. That was then their key issue. This house ended up being gone.
Hmm.
Uh, and then here's a church and there was nobody here trying to fight this fire. I mean, they were, whether, and I know there were $17 million of cuts, whether there would have been that much more of a response. I mean, the winds were so strong, the fire was so widespread. There's just simply not, I don't think you could have on hand that many people to respond to what was going on with the winds. Um, and so then I came across in the early morning of the second day, a place called Malibu Village. There was this Buddha that was just sitting there peacefully. And I thought, well, this, is really symbolic. And so I did a couple of photos of it, and then I did the video. And Jay's going to help me. Or Jay, you're going to show it, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Doing it right now.
okay, here we go. So Jay's going to show. So this is about a 30-second video of what it looks like. I don't think we can see it, can we?
Yeah.
And I just shot this with my iPhone, but I was so struck by it. And even though I love stills, there is something about video that can convey, the sound of what it was, like there, more than a still image. And so now I've got to get that uh, keynote back,
You share again, right, Jay?
and can you see it again, or do I need to reshare
You need
again?
to reshare, the,
Okay, so let's go back to share. I'm just gonna, okay, now you can see it again, right? And
yes, sir.
so, right, and so now I will open that back up.
There you go.
There we go. We'll play it from this slide.
So,
Okay.
Mark, had you ever covered something like this where you really have to watch behind you, in front of you, so you don't get trapped yourself?
That is a great question, Frank. I have, covered the tsunami in Japan. And we had a 7.1 earthquake, and I was on the 16th floor in Sendai, and this epicenter, the second earthquake was pretty much under us. But that's a different ball game. And I've been in Ukraine twice during a war, but different. But fires is something I really don't cover too much, and I think I almost made a fatal mistake, and I'll show some photos from that in a minute. Um, and actually, it's this
Hmm.
story right here where I had gone up to Mulholland Drive. I was looking for a way to get in to where the guys that were working on the line, and so I was able to come from the valley side, park on Mulholland Drive, and then hike in about a mile or so on one of the fire roads. And I got in, and I was able to photograph them trying to do some backfires and working a line. And I have a lot more. They have prisoners there that are trying to do better for themselves, and so they were working the line and other people. And then the captain said, you better get out of here. We had the fire jump over uh, yesterday, and it really moves fast. And I said we lost a truck yesterday, and so I started to turn around to walk back after I felt I had done enough coverage. And as I started to walk back, it really flared up, and something told me to hold on and not continue walking. And if I had, I don't think I would have made it. And um, oh, this is an earlier shot, but then this is my view. This is where I had walked in from.
Mhm.
This is heading north to the valley. And so if I had left 30 seconds earlier, which was the plan, I just got held up. Something just sort of told me to hold up. This is what was in front of me. And I really do think 30 seconds into this, I don't think I would have made it out. And I tend not to uh, exaggerate. Um,
Really?
but it really was incredible. And so the fire captain yelled at me and said, "Get into the cab of his truck," which I wrote it out, and I do have a video of that, which I don't have together yet. But you guys get, I think, an idea of how intense it was, and it was on three sides of us, and fortunately, so this is to the right side, uh,
Hmm.
out the window, but it was really intense to say the least.
And Mark, are you wearing any kind of, fireman type clothing?
Yeah, I have a yellow fire jacket that a lot of the press people wear.
Okay.
Uh, Pants are normal. Some journalists wear, the pants too. It probably would be a good idea. I had boots, to deal, with this. The jacket, would have been of help. I was wearing a mask.
Right.
And then I found an interesting angle from Mountain Gate where there's a big country club up there, and was able to shoot down. Once again, I think I used the 400, 2.8, and a 200, 70 to 200, and would just wait for airdrops to come by. But obviously here, thought there was a certain, symbolism, with the American flag, and was very conscious about when it was fluttering, to the left or to the right, unfurling. Uh, but it was incredible the precision of these pilots. I mean, if not for the pilots, the fire would probably be raging full blast still. I mean, as much as the people on the ground try to do stuff, the work that these planes and helicopters can do is incredible with this fuss tech, if I'm saying it right. Um,
And
and,
Mark, you're alone?
yes,
You're alone. Okay.
I was alone, and so the danger here is also, obviously limited visibility, and also these high tension wires everywhere, and they really come in low. And so first they have a spotter, and I have photos of that. I didn't include it, but first they have a spotter plane, a very small plane, comes in and then puts a puff of smoke out uh, to show the tanker pilot where to drop Fostech. And then they circle around, and then the small plane puts out a little uh, uh, thing of smoke again to show where to go, and then the tanker drops a load. But these guys are just absolutely amazing what they can do.
And Mark, what are
Yeah.
the similarities or differences covering conflict? You know, conflict zones, in your career to covering something like this.
Well, this is very similar to covering the tsunami, where everybody's on the same side, really
Mm,
trying to help everybody. There's no negativity, uh, where war has hatred, of the other
mm,
side. I mean, but people are helping each other. Let's say, like in Ukraine and Kharkiv and whatever, they were trying to do the best for other people in their city, like having, um, during Christmas time, they put on shows for kids in the subway, things like that. And I love that sort of rallying together sort of thing. But there's a much more we're all in this together uh, feeling from everybody, and people really rally, and it's just so impressive. And in terms of danger, I think fire is maybe well, it's different. I mean, it depends where you are. I mean, only one day in Ukraine, in a town called Vovchansk, did I really feel like, well, this could really, uh, be a problem. I'm not a frontline conflict photographer. I'm doing more human interest stories. There, I was doing something on animal rescuers. Um, but it was incredible to see these guys at work. And so sometimes they would drop it directly on the fire. Sometimes they would drop it um, uh, in advance. And so what they were really trying to do is draw a line to not let it get to the high tension wires. That was the big goal.
mm,
Um, but going back to then, the aftermath. One of the things, and we all know Sunset Boulevard. The drive out to Sunset, in PCH, and a lot of people. The fire was moving so fast that first day, people left their cars in the middle of the street and ran to the beach for safety. And so when I got there, there were cars littered all over the place, and it was hit and miss on the right side, unless you were parked next to this big apartment complex that burned down, and the cars caught on fire. A lot of cars, and very high end cars, because they were mostly Palisades people, which is a very high end area. They The cars were okay, but in order to get the fire trucks through, they brought in bulldozers and pushed the
mm,
trucks to the side and destroyed those cars. And so you had very few uh, cars that had been left out there. Either they were damaged by or destroyed by the fire, or by moving over to the side. Amazingly enough, some guy went had ridden his bicycle. He had lived up in Palisades. He lost his house, but he had his Land Rover, and he was one of the people who ran down, left his car, and they wouldn't let him back past the police checkpoint. And I was coming in, so I said to the policeman, "Could I?" If I see his car, can I drive it out for him? And the policeman said, yeah, no problem at all. And so near the Self-Realization Center, And I told the guy, I said, there's a good chance it's gone because I'd been there earlier. But anyway, I went up there and I found his car and I drove it out. So at least he had
Wow.
his Land Rover.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, this is in Palisades in the village there. It really reached the flat lands, not just up in the hills. And so this is just some of the after point. Now in
So,
our
Mark,
yep.
I got to interrupt you, Mark. So, do you get a sense that the city was, as prepared as you possibly can be to have bulldozers ready? These folks here, like to start moving cars out of the way. I didn't even think of that. Yeah, I mean, they were well prepared as much as you can be.
The I see now, maybe it took a little bit of time. I mean, there were so many fires that were going on with nobody there. In other words, simply places were catching on fire, burning down. So there wasn't enough manpower. I don't know if you could ever have enough. I mean, that's why they have the agreements with Western states to bring more people in, but that takes time. I think with the winds and the quick spread of the fire, uh, incredible damage was going to be done either way. But I think once about it, and it'll be interesting to hear David what he says about it. But I think about a day in, things really started coming together. And I think seeing now you drive down the street in these areas, and there's so many uh, power, electrical, in other words, utility trucks, just incredible armada of trucks going up and down doing things to try to get power back in those areas, remote generated, everything. And so I
Yeah.
think now they're up and running. And then, of course, unfortunately, in Altadena, they had some trouble with looting, and so they brought in the National Guard, and now there's National Guard also in Palisades. But I would say so few people involved in looting.
What
It's
could they take? I mean, everything is burnt,
Oh,
right?
no,
I mean,
no, no. What's happening
just
is
some of the houses that made it.
well, many houses made it, but they were in the exclusion zone, and so many houses are perfectly
Vacant.
fine, and so you had people looting. You didn't have that very much in Palisades, but they did bring in National Guard to relieve some of the pressure on the police. In other words, to block all the street entrances.
Mm.
And so I tried to then convert my thinking to, what was left behind destroyed. And so so from a technical point of view, here I used, a flash to just illuminate, the tile in the foreground, flash off camera just to illuminate so I could balance, because you never know where you're going to be at a certain time of day,
Yeah.
so I like to be prepared for that. And just little, you know, memories of previous lives. Um, Everybody know who this is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nick.
Yeah, good old Nick Good. It's amazing. I mean, you think 50 years ago he shot the napalm shot, and he
Yeah.
still looks great and still is out there. Still loves getting out there, covering things. He did take a fall in Altadena though. But here's one of the rescue centers or volunteer centers, and they were great and
And how
so.
many days after is that already, Mark?
Well, this is already now, I think, a week later that I did this shot with Nick. These were different days. I mean, Nick and I went out to Palisades a few days ago. Um, so I don't know, about 5 days, but then I went out with cadaver dogs, which I did in Japan as well with the tsunami. And they're amazing. They are so well trained. I mean, and a lot of them sort of get hooked on the bottom of bathtub drains, but they don't start barking. In other words, because there's human, skin or whatever, just that's just it's so slight, but yet they don't bark. They know at what point to bark, but they'll really work that area for a while. And what they do is they have two separate dogs. They have one go in and then they'll have a separate one. And if the second dog goes to the same area, they know there's something there that they have to work on. But this dog did find an urn, and so that's how sensitive their noses are. That
Wait, so Mark,
Wow.
Mark, so you're saying that they go into that bathtub, and just because people had already showered in there and bathed, they could smell that even after that fire.
in the drain area, and
Wow.
underneath the drain area. It's just unbelievable. But they don't bark. See, that's the thing. They know the difference. In other words, they'll stick there for a while. They also know if they find an animal not to bark. They might work the place for. In other words, they'll stay there and they'll keep sort of digging and looking, but they won't bark. Only if there's human remains. And they practice with cadavers, right? That
Yeah,
that are
yeah.
that they get.
Wow.
Um, and here's another one. And so, right, so this would be the second one coming in to look around, and they both air scented an urn at this house, which was
Wow.
amazing.
Amazing. Wow.
And then I went to the Pasadena Humane Society, and what happens is, of course, many people, fled, but sometimes their animals were left behind, or they have to stay in hotels where they can't bring their animals. And so, the Pasadena Humane Society did a couple of things. One is they took care of animals that were strays, or brought in that were injured, or they housed temporary homes for animals that couldn't be, anywhere else. But there were some horrific
Hmm.
scenes there, and cats are so stoic. It's amazing how they can handle this. I mean, look at this poor
Mm.
cat with his back leg. But these great people, are really doing something to make a difference. So many of them are volunteers.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh,
and
is that the same cat?
a different cat, different cat.
Wow.
And
Oh
I'm
my
going to go
God.
back. I'm going to go back again. I said I'd like to adopt him if or she if she makes it.
Oh dear.
It's really really tough. And this is not a great shot, but it's a personal shot because I had two friends who lost houses. One, some of you guys might know Iberian X. You know him? He,
Wow. Oh really?
he lost his house in Altadena.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
you're right. As you know, yeah, he's a big part of the LA photo community. He lost his
Yeah.
house, and my friend Kelly Wursler is an interior designer, lost her Malibu house. But this is Will Rogers State Park, and I used to as a kid. And I'm from New York originally, but I used to as a kid hike here with my parents, and it was so fun to go into Will Rogers' house and hear about Will Rogers. But it's gone now. This is it, and so to see that sort of somehow made it a little more personal. Not that I was oblivious to all the suffering of all the other people, of course, but when you see something that's part of your childhood, just an irony off to your right for those who have been there. Will Rogers had a two-hole golf course on the right side. He would play up the hill slightly and then down and then up and down, and that's to the right. And people, I said to the sheriff that was there, because there was one sheriff up there, and he said I always wondered what that was, why they were kind of this mound. It looked like a sand trap, and so I
You,
told
you
him that.
Mark, listening to you, especially a heartwarming story like that,
Yeah,
like what part of like how does this affect you because it's your home too, right? I mean, it's not just a place you flew into. And this I'll probably ask David the same question, right?
yeah.
I mean, this is your neighborhood. You have history there. How is that for you?
Um, to be honest with you, I mean, we've been through earthquakes before that did more damage to when I was living at home. Our chimney collapsed and things like, and a brick went through my mom's Rambler. I don't know if they make Ramblers anymore,
I
but
don't
through
think
her.
so.
No, right. And
AMC.
you're right.
Right.
And so that was kind of a little more personal in that sense. But the scale of it is incredible. The scale of it's amazing. But there's so many positive things about people working together. And I had no personal trauma. So, uh, and I've seen a lot of destruction all over the world. So I know for like people like Jim Nockway and other people that have covered so much stuff, and all of a sudden they're at home in New York, and then you have 9/11, and that was really disturbing. I didn't have that sort of
Mm.
response, but also it wasn't an attack. See, if we had had a terrorist attack here, then
Yeah,
I'd
yeah.
have much more of a reaction. And so these are just some, shots just to try to show, okay, here's this idyllic place, with a view, and then it's just reduced to that, to this, rubble. These homes, and I remember seeing David's great shot of a house very close, to here. Actually, this is that
That's
place.
the same place. Yeah,
That's
the
the same place
spiral
I just did it.
staircase. Yeah.
Yeah, I just did it from the other, angle.
It's so weird to see these kind of photographs with the water right there and these burnt out homes, right? I
And that's
mean,
what I wanted to do. And then that's the
yeah, it's
bizarre
great.
thing. And this morning I photographed uh, a relative, a distant relative of a person who died on this side of PCH. And that was really surprising that anybody would pass away on the beach side of PCH. But if I had lived there, I wouldn't have thought, oh, the fires aren't going to be able to jump over here. And
Over
so
the highway, right?
over the highway, yeah, and also it was just sort of dirt, as you can see on the right side. So I might not have been, very smart about it.
Mm,
But the
yeah.
amount of destruction is immense. But look how somebody's already up there, and you see this all the way
Yeah.
up and down PCH. They're getting in there, um, and getting electricity back up and running, and so I think there's a lot of positive takeaways, from that.
That's the same
Uh,
Buddha. Same
mm,
Buddha. No,
sorry?
Is that the same Buddha?
same Buddha.
No, 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 different Buddha, completely. A good thing to be in a fire is a Buddha. I see that because there's so many Buddhas. I don't know, David, from your coverage, did you notice there were a lot of Buddhas around?
Yeah, I've got some Buddhas in my take also. Yeah. Well,
Exactly.
it is the west side of Los Angeles, so you're gonna see some Buddhists. Yeah.
Exactly. I didn't see too many in
Yeah.
Altadena. That's a good point. That's an excellent point. And this is it's Winged Victory. Right? No, 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 no. It's come on, what's this one, you guys? Venus de Milo?
Yes, the Milo.
Yeah,
What is it so?
That's
Venus
Matt.
de Milo.
She's the armless.
Yeah. And so, if we're doing this as a photo essay, I thought I would conclude with, sunset and the damage. And so, Robert, remember from our workshop in India, so this is how you conclude a photo essay. It's a simple one, just,
You have a good memory, Mark.
yeah,
It
there
makes
you
all
go.
sense.
It makes sense. And so if any of you guys want to follow me, that's my Instagram. And so do we do questions at the end, David, Frank,
You know
or?
what? Why don't we let David go
Yeah,
and you present, and then everyone could ask questions at the end because there's so much
perfect.
similarities.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Of course. Sure. Okay.
and Mark, put
Yeah.
in the chat room, all this information, your YouTube channel, your website, so
Okay.
everyone has that if they
Sounds
want.
perfect.
Thank you very much for that, Mark. That was yeah, very, very intense. And now we have another dear friend, David Butow, who was there as well. So David, it's all yours.
Okay, here we go. Whoop, sorry. Okay, here we go. Yeah, now is everything looking proper at your
Yes,
end?
it's all full screen. You're great.
Okay, thank you. No, thanks everybody for joining. It's great to see some of you. I recognize some names here. I really appreciate it, and it was super interesting to hear Mark's recollections of what he saw and the pictures. It's um yeah, it's interesting again because we were very close to each other or in sort of proximity, but just like this, it gives you an idea of how extensive this whole thing was because just one person has just their own micro view of the whole thing. And there were so many different fires that were happening at the same time that it was just, it was impossible for one person to be everywhere. So it's kind of amazing, like when I just for myself, like when I'm looking at news pictures in during the thing and in the days afterwards and seeing people's Instagram feeds, how many different scenes people captured, because you had the West Side, you had Malibu, Pac Palisades, and then which started on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday in Altadena, which is for those of you who are not that familiar with LA, as the crow flies, it's probably maybe 30 miles or something from the coast. And so there's a new fire cropped up there. And I was on the west side in LA on Tuesday and Wednesday, so I missed the beginning of that fire in Altadena, but then went there later. So anyway, on Tuesday afternoon, I was at home and I heard or saw online something about this fire kicking off. So basically, I just grabbed a couple of cameras and and headed out straight on Sunset, more or less to the PCH. So Mark and I think we were pretty close to each other at the time, and this was the scene. I mean, it was by the time I was there, it was like 3:30 in the afternoon, maybe, and it was so it was late-ish in the day here. The sunset's about 5 o'clock. So with the smoke and everything, it was already starting to get dark. But you see these people in their cars, driving down. This is Sunset, and it's just about maybe maybe a quarter of a mile from the PCH here.
And David, while this is all happening, is there mass traffic, leaving these areas, and is there gridlock? What's going on that, that piece of it?
It's funny. I didn't really see that. And there was gridlock before I got there. So this is a woman who was just making her way down the hill as I was on foot at this point, making my way up the hill, not that far from my car. But this is the gridlock. And I think, Mark, you photographed the, oh, sorry. It just went back to contact sheet, didn't it?
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And David, you're right. When we see that that last slide, that's where I showed the burned out cars. But that the only truck, there's only one vehicle that's still there, and it's that K Kids lunchbox. All those other cars, the ones on the left side are burned, but that and they've been towed away. The ones on the right were pushed out of the way. That's why they're smashed. They're all gone. But that K Kids lunchbox truck is still there on the side.
That's still there. That's so bizarre. There are a couple of schools right around there. There's a Waldorf school. I happen to know the principal of that school, and it was pretty much destroyed, mostly destroyed. I wonder if the lunch boxes were headed for that school. It's funny. I never really noticed what that truck was. So I parked my car in this little lot. That's not my car, but and as I was making my way up the hill, I happened to run into a couple of colleagues, and one of them said, "Hey, did you park in that lot just down there?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he said, I would move my car if I were you, because at that point um, the fire was starting to come down the hill right at the edge of that, and my car was about 3 or 4 cars just down from this car, so 2 or 3 cars in that little lot caught on fire while I was there. So one of the first things I did was I caught up with this group of firefighters, and again, these are incarcerated people. These were all women, probably from one of the LA County jails, and they volunteer for this job. They get paid, I think, like about $10 an hour or something to do this work. And I was just with them for just a few minutes. They were just starting to get mobilized, so they didn't really get on the scene or up starting fighting the fire when I was with them.
Yeah, David, I don't know if you would know, but are these folks trained at all?
I'm sure they have some training. I'm
Yeah,
sure they are. And so you can see they're wearing orange, and then the firefighter on the left with the red hat, that's somebody from I think LA County Fire. So that's probably a professional
Mm.
firefighter who's kind of like in charge of managing this team. That's my guess anyway. So I had left the house so quickly, and I just grabbed a couple cameras and a couple of batteries, and I pretty soon ran out of battery power in both of my cameras. And then I also had some personal stuff to attend to. So I left kind of when it got dark on the west side, and I just decided to, go home, charge my stuff, regroup, and then get up very early the next morning and head back out, just like Mark did, really before dawn. So this is about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, maybe. Again, this is Sunset Boulevard. I drove right out. It's still completely dark, and I don't even remember. I mean, it's eerie because the fires were raging here, but to get to this spot, I don't even remember having to go through any checkpoints at all. And I have LAPD passes and stuff like Mark does, which really gave me pretty much unfettered access to all these areas. But at this point, like, I don't even remember having to use it at all. And this is
And are people still following, the traffic lights, or is it bedlam? Give us a sense
it's
of that.
there's actually no one around. So I mean, in this particular part of town, I think for the most part, everyone had evacuated at this point, and that's why the fatality, the casualty rate was so low because there were evacuation orders that had kicked in, let's say roughly 12 hours before this. So fortunately, like everybody had moved out, and there was no traffic at all on Sunset. I mean, there was just like nobody around at this point. I think this photo is just it's just kind of like right next to the first one you saw. Again, it's at Sunset and on Sunset Boulevard, which for those of you who aren't familiar, runs all the way from downtown Los Angeles to the ocean, and that's about maybe 20 miles roughly. Oh, I don't know why this keeps happening. 20 miles again as the crow flies. I'm sorry, I don't know why it's doing that. Um, okay.
David,
Maybe
I
it's 'cause
hate to
I'm talking.
interrupt. That
Yeah.
happens when somebody tries to join in the meeting, and they're in a
Ah. Oh, I thought it was me talking too much. Okay. Okay. So this is not far from those first two pictures. Again, this is Wednesday morning, so the second day of the fire, Pacific Palisades. And this is a neighborhood that is not some of the Palisades, like as you saw from the first couple of pictures that I showed, like with the fire crew, it's very much like in the hills and it's very rustic. And there are a lot of celebrities, actors who have houses with some property around them and multiple structures and things like that are kind of nestled in the hills or in these little valleys. This is not a part of town that's like that. This is where it sort of looks more like a traditional neighborhood. And I ended up staying in this neighborhood for most of the day. So as the sun is starting to rise, I realize this gives me an opportunity now to get some ambient light and just have a better sense of what the full scope of the damage was. And as it got light, I have to say it was jaw dropping.
Mm. It's so interesting to hear a photographer speak, waiting for the light to come, even in these circumstances. That's the presence of mind is so intense. That's
Mm, mm. Yeah, exactly. And I just, after I kind of pulled into this neighborhood, and this is for those of you who might be familiar, it's kind of known, I think, as Alphabet Streets,
yeah,
part of the Palisades, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
there's streets that start with A and then it goes through the alphabet. So this is on the street that I think that starts with I. I can't remember the name of it, but there were there were no fire crews around initially. Most of the houses had been burned. There were a few houses that were on fire at that point. There were a few police cars that had started to assemble like a couple of blocks away, kind of roughly speaking at the entrance to this neighborhood. And I didn't know what the uh I didn't exactly know what the protocol was, and I was a little bit worried about getting not being able to get back in if I left. So instead of going and checking out what might be happening around or further up Sunset or in other neighborhoods, I just decided to stay until it got light. And it's a good point to good time to mention maybe that I covered the fires or the aftermath of the fires in Maui a year and a half ago, and I was on assignment at that time for Time Magazine, and the 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 main town in Maui that got burned up is called Lahaina, and that is about 20 miles from the town where you fly into. I can't remember the name of that place. It was the first time I'd been to Maui. So anyway, the road that goes to Lahaina was closed, and it was closed to everybody except for, or all vehicles except for emergency vehicles. So even with the press pass, even with all that, as a journalist, you could not just simply get in your rental car and drive to Lahaina. And I spent 2 or 3 days in this other town, the main town where the airport was, where there was some damage, but fairly minimal, just kind of working those situations, but trying to figure out if I could get a ride into Lahaina. And I managed eventually to get into, through a couple of contacts, through some, with 3 or 4 guys, young guys who had Red Cross access. And I got in their car and I basically went in with them. And there were rumors before on that morning, I think that I got in that the authorities were starting to arrest journalists in Lahaina. And when I got in Lahaina, I worked as quickly as I could for about 30 minutes, mostly in the presence of these guys with the Red Cross access. And then the police showed up, and I was 99% sure I was going to get arrested. But I somehow we talked our way out of it, and I split. I got a ride. I went back to the airport, and that was the end of that. It was night and day difference between that experience where I had to sneak in compared to I didn't have a single problem with any checkpoints in LA once I showed my credentials, getting through. And there's a California law that basically permits the media, unless there's some extenuating circumstance, from being able to get in and cover these scenes. So I find that, obviously it's good for me, but I think it's just good for public information in general that we're able to go in and see these things. So as you can see, this is the same neighborhood. It's starting to get light. I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot. Are there any
No,
questions?
no,
or-
you're fine. As soon as I have a question, you seem to answer it, David.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, again, the same neighborhood. It's, probably 10 o'clock in the morning or something. I see this guy walking down the street. Again, there's almost no one around. There are a couple of TV vans. You see a couple, three kind of random people walking around. So I
Yeah,
went to this
any
guy.
kind of yeah, David, for you, is there any kind of similarities to, you covering, war zones and abandoned buildings and like what's going on in Ukraine? Do you like, as you're experiencing this, does something come flash back to you? This feels like, a burnt out, neighborhood in Ukraine or anything else that you've documented before?
In a sense, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean it's a scene of tragedy, and when you see the scale of it, it's hard to take in, frankly. And I feel bad on a basic level when I see the scale of it, but it's almost so much to take in the moment that it doesn't impact me in a kind of an emotional way, but that will happen later, which I'll talk about, as we sort of get into the more of the aftermath. Um, I mean, certainly, okay, I see the issue, right? Certainly, so we're going to go through all these again. The Sorry, I lost my train of thought, but yeah, and also when it's a dynamic situation, if it's if you feel like there is some danger involved, then it's a matter of just situational awareness, and if you're in a thing that seems to be developing and maybe going in a not safe direction, then um my strategy is to do the work as quickly as possible and then get out.
Yeah. And are you wearing
So
a respirator or any kind of eye protection?
definitely eye protection, because I have a phobia about that. So I have these tactical goggles that I wear that kind of like seal my eyes off. And then I had a respirator with me. Frankly, I just didn't wear it. I should have worn it. But I'm just sort of moving around fast, and yeah, but I was even wearing a helmet at some point during that day, just because the winds were blowing this debris. It was just, the winds were still raging at that point. So this guy, as when I stopped and talked to him, he told me that he was trying to get up to his house, and um, I gave him a ride, and he lived about maybe a mile from where I saw him, and he knew that his house was in a place that it was in danger, but he didn't know what had happened. But when we got there, we saw that his house had been destroyed, and obviously, I just felt terrible for him. He stayed for about 15 minutes. I stayed with him while he took some videos of the house, and then I gave him a ride back down the hill.
Mm. How could that is that a mailbox right in front?
Mhm. Yeah, isn't that nuts? Right?
Impossible.
And the thing is, once in a neighborhood like this where so many of the houses have caught on fire, once a house catches on fire, that fire is not going to get put out. I mean, there are no crews that are going to then expend their resources to put out a fire on a house that's already pretty much gone. And so that's why you see the scale of damage to each property. It's because the fire doesn't get put out. It just burns until it goes out on its own, you know. And so
Yeah. No, I was going to say it really is great that you get everyone out, right? You know, everyone has to leave because you could imagine families standing in front of their houses, you know, begging the firemen, help me, right? I mean, all of that. It's probably easier for, I guess, emotionally as well, for them to come back and see it gone than watch it go.
yeah, that's a good point, right? And exactly. And it's super dangerous for them to
Yeah.
stay. Um, so yeah, this is that again, this is Wednesday's the second day that afternoon, and you can kind of get a sense of, you know, those initial pictures that I showed from this neighborhood. It's pretty flat, but then, you know, you know, it makes a way up in the hills. And so basically, if you're looking down the hill like this, the smoke is obscuring it. But basically, that whole neighborhood is wiped out. Um, yeah, this is another view from roughly the same location.
And any idea where all these folks are going to? You know, do they, I mean, are they set up, you know, like at the Coliseum, you know, places for people to bed down for a few, you know, for a few nights before it's figured out?
I know that I think they're particularly like more on the east side and around the Altadena fire. I think there were more people who were in like public refugee centers. I know that like the hotels all around there were booked, um, and are probably still quite busy a few days after it happened. So I think people stayed with, you know, friends, and it's just, you know, just pure emergency situation, and they just grab whatever they can, stuff it into a few boxes, load it into their cars, and go wherever they can. Yeah, so this is again, this is the same neighborhood. This is one of the few crews that I ran into, and they're just basically doing mop up. In this case, you know, you can see there's one house that's on fire at the moment, and there was a house which is going to be a loss, but there's a house next to it that's still pretty intact. So what they were doing essentially is doing a triage, right? And so they go into a neighborhood, they see 90% of the houses have been lost, but maybe there's a few that are still there. And if they can put out fires that are nearby that threaten those remaining 10%, that remaining 10%, then, you know, at least they can save a few houses here and there. This is downtown Pacific Palisades now. So it's, I mean, I use air quotes around downtown. It's a few blocks of, of businesses. There's one kind of like a newer upscale shopping center that has kind of like boutique shops and nice, you know, restaurants and things like that. You know, very high end because a lot of celebrities live around here. That didn't burn up, but there's kind of the older part of Pacific Palisades did. I mean, this is like one block worth of commercial destruction right here.
That's commercial.
Yeah, that's commercial. Yeah, exactly. And it's just again, there's no, you know, it's sort of like you're standing there, you're in the middle of these scenes and you're taking pictures and you're trying to convey what you're seeing with your eyes. And then I would look at the screen on the back of my camera and it just doesn't do justice to what you see because there's just no way to get that scope. Again, same area here.
And do you have a drone?
I,
Did you
you know,
think of that?
I actually I don't have my own drone right now, but I have a drone license. But I knew that the FAA was had a temporary flight restrictions over these areas for several days after the fire, so I didn't even consider flying a drone. And in fact, some people did. And there was
Yeah.
one instance where a drone collided with one of these firefighting planes, and it damaged the plane enough that the plane had to like go back to base and get repaired. So
Wow.
in fact, I saw it, which is horrible, right? And I saw you know, the FBI or whoever, some authorities found the wreckage of that drone, and the FBI is now investigating who it belonged to. So totally, I think that person should get the book thrown at them, you know,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, again, that's that first afternoon. This is another, you know, this is a really nice, really nice building. Again, I used to, I still, just up until 2 weeks ago, I have a motorcycle and I love to ride on Sunset from my neighborhood out past this. This is right off of Sunset Boulevard down to the PCH and then kind of ride around. And so this is like a place that I would have passed by, dozens, at least hundreds of times, maybe.
Mm.
Same neighborhood. Again, it was kind of weird, just the lemons that had survived. I saw a lot of fruit trees actually all over that like didn't get burned up, which is kind of something kind of lovely about that. So the next day, so that was Wednesday that we just saw, and then the next day, I knew that all these things had happened in Altadena the day before, and it was really just kind of like chaos there. So I decided to go out to Altadena, and this was like one of the first things I thought, this guy, this is not his house. His house actually made it, but he was walking around with a Glock 9mm on his waistband there. Because there were already reports of looters at that point. Some volunteers, right? And the Altadena is a different type of community than Pac Palisades, which is one of the most upscale and probably most expensive, some of the most expensive real estate in the United States. In Altadena, it's mixed. And the guy, this is a father and son. I just stumbled upon this scene. Um, he is a member of a singing group called The Waters. It's a family kind of R&B singing group that's backed up like Michael Jackson and a lot of like top flight recording artists. And he had moved into his house in 1979. His sister, who's also in the group, lives right up the street. He lost his house. His sister's house, fortunately, was okay. His son grew up in this house. So yeah, just a heartbreaking moment for him. But I tell you, he was just strong as an ox, mentally and emotionally, in the 20 or 30 minutes that I spent with him. And the fireman that you see here is from uh, Contra Costa County, which is in Northern California. It's near Oakland, kind of. And they had come down, and the small crew had been tasked with putting out kind of the remains of the fire at his house, just what was just the embers that were burning. And then the fire captain here said, "Hey, I'm happy to help you go through any of this if it would help," which he did. And it was just a very sweet moment. Um, they sifted through the rubble. This guy found a necklace that his daughter had given him not long before this happened, actually. And I tell you, he was strong and very positive. He's probably about 80 years old, maybe. And then at the end of this, he was so gracious and he thanked the crew.
With houses this size, right? I mean, they're small enough to when you go back in and of course it's all gone, you can know where like a certain area was. Like that was the bedroom. This is, the kids' room, and you have an idea that maybe we can find something in that place.
Yeah, that's right. It's so interesting too, because I'm actually kind of surprised sometimes because as I'll show you later, I have a few other pictures of people doing this, that it's that they really have to figure it out. It's not
Mm,
like, I mean, you know what I mean? You come home, if
yeah.
you live there for a few years, you can almost go in with your eyes closed and get to your closet or whatever, right? But they're actually having to look down and think about it. Like, oh, okay, wait a minute. This is the where the living room was, and that kind of thing. But that's exactly what they're trying to do. They know maybe some place where they've kept something or they had a safe. I saw a lot of fireproof safes that aren't that fireproof, by the way. Um, yeah, so this is Altadena. So I think it was, yeah, this is probably the same day that I took the pictures of that man and the fire guys. I stayed basically until it got dark. At some point, I'm on this block, and then I hear this guy kind of calling out to me, and it was this young man whose house was lost. He owns that house. His father had bought it in the 1960s. And he was, I think he was sort of in a state of shock. This is when he had just come back, I think about a half an hour before this to see what had happened, and he basically snuck in. I mean, one of the ironies here is that, as Mark and I were talking about, with the press passes, you can get in, you can just get in anywhere. But residents, no matter what's happened to them, whether their house is standing or it's not, are actually not allowed back in until days later. They're only days or weeks later, they're only just now starting to go back in. But if you're from there and you grew up there, maybe you know some back roads and ways that you can kind of sneak in, so that you would occasionally see people who maybe technically weren't supposed to be there. And in some cases, some of those people had actually stayed and they never left. Maybe their house was okay, so they were able to stay in their house. So I did that for a day. And again, the first, I guess, 3 days I'm a member of a picture agency called Redux. So I was sending pictures to my agency a couple times a day, and then my agency distributes them, to different publications. And then by I guess the fourth day, I picked up an assignment for CNN.com to work with a writer, and we ended up spending a couple of days following just three people who had lost their homes and who were now returning. In two out of the three cases, I was with them when they first went back. One of those being this woman she's a prop designer for movies and stage productions. So she went back to just see if there was anything left, anything of value. One of the heartbreaking things about this is that there's a spoon that she found that had belonged to her grandfather, who brought that from Germany, But just like there's almost nothing that's salvageable. She found the remains of her cat while I was there, which was just a real drag, and it was, yeah. So this is a woman who, yeah, she's 81 years old, and she's uses a walker, and she didn't wasn't really able to get out of the car to see the remains of her house, but she knew it had been lost, and this was the first time that she had a chance to actually look at it. She was with her daughter, who's here in this photograph. Her daughter got out, and I accompanied the daughter as she kind of walked around and first saw what had happened. The daughter doesn't live in the house, but she happened to be with her mother when the fire happened, and they fled together. So again, it's just, you know, just nearly unbearable to watch. Same one. And this is just a general overview of Altadena. Again, it's just impossible to convey the scale of this. It's just block after block. I should note too that one of the sad things about this that hasn't really been discussed that much, because there's so many personal tragedies, is that there's a lot of great architecture that's been lost. In Altadena, which is just north of Pasadena, it's kind of known as sort of one of the older parts of LA. And there were some great houses that are like 100 years old, Spanish style in particular, which is very typical for that area and of LA in general. And these are near landmark status buildings that are now, there's just nothing left. And so even if you have all the funding in the world, and as fast as things can get rebuilt and people get back on their feet and into their new houses, it's never going to be the same.
Yeah, I mean, the architects in this space may end up being really boring just to get houses up, right?
Yeah, you wonder about, I've been thinking about that. Like what are they going to do? That's exactly
Because I'm
right.
sure all these houses were unique to their neighbors' homes. It wasn't just cookie cutter.
Yes, exactly. This is before a lot of these neighborhoods. It's like they were developed before the cookie cutter suburban thing
Yeah.
happened in the 50s. So after the CNN assignment, I took an assignment for Die Zeit, the German weekly newspaper, and they were focused on the west side of LA. So I went out, I worked with a writer a little bit one afternoon, and then ended up mostly working on my own. This is, this is in Malibu. This is these are probably all houses right here. Multi-million dollar properties. I happen
And
to
that's all electric workers there?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And to Mark's point, I mean, it was amazing. Just the crews. This is, about a week after it happened, if that. And so the crews are like immediately out there trying to get things going again. And that's a good sign. I happened to run into, I was just walking down an area that looked like this into the son of the actor Ryan O'Neal. His name is Patrick O'Neal, and we're about the same age. And his dad had lived in the house that got burned up, basically up until he died about a year ago. I think he was 82 years old. But his son, who I met, had been living in the house since his dad died, and he was there just by himself, sifting through the rubble and just. So this is an interesting setup. This is in Pacific Palisades. You can see just how it's not random, because I think the house on the right, in terms of the materials that it's made out of, was just more resistant, right? It's probably a much newer house than the one that burned up on the left. But you did see this occasionally, where you had a house that just almost like it didn't have a scratch on it, and it's right next to a house that's just leveled. Okay, the Buddhas. This is right at the intersection of Topanga Canyon Boulevard, I guess it is, and the Pacific Coast Highway. So this was, I mean, I passed by the store a million times, because just driving down Topanga to the coast or driving up the PCH, is a cool, like an outdoor furniture, plants, stuff like that, when the only thing left were these Buddhas. I think this is the last picture in my set. This is you can just see this was a essentially like a mobile home park. And when I say mobile homes, I don't mean the houses had wheels, but it's that sort of type of structure. It might be a 1 or 2 bedroom thing, but it was obviously a primo place to live. And it was just 100% gone. All right, I think that's the last photo. Thank you for watching.
Wow. So I have to ask both of you. I mean, do you when you finish projects like this, and I know you're not even done yet because unfortunately more things are happening. Do you like how do you deal with the stress of all of this? Like, is it similar again coming from, a conflict zone, then you go home, the back and forth? How do you guys deal with that?
David, why don't you answer first?
I was hoping you'd go first, but okay.
Okay.
Seriously, I was like, "Oh, Mark." No, I've actually found it kind of difficult. I think that to your point, Frank, it is a little bit different when it's your own neighborhood, because you do have some kind of well, not neighborhood, but your own city. You do have some sort of personal connection to it, and then you aren't away from it. You're not getting on a plane and then going home. It's right here. And I think I think I started to feel it. I started to feel it really when I was out with the people who had gone back to their homes. I'll just clear this away. I'll stop. I don't know. Are we stop sharing at this point?
No.
Okay. Yes,
Yeah.
we've stopped sharing. Okay. Yeah. I mean, is it when things, the scale of it is so immense that that doesn't, again, I think I said it's not really, that doesn't affect me emotionally. It's more just a jaw-dropping experience to see it. But then when you see things on the micro level, here's one person who's lost one cat. That was like, then you sort of feel it in a way that maybe it's just seems a little bit more direct and personal. And yeah, it's been stressful, I gotta say.
I guess when you guys get to your colleagues who covered 9/11, who lived in New York, there may be similarities on some level.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, probably right. And I think in a lot of ways, yeah, to like what Mark said, that was an attack, and it was much worse because so many people died. I mean, that's the thing. This is, I mean, as bad as as the casualty count is compared to the physical damage, there's this huge disparity,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Whereas New
Yeah.
York, you had 3,000 people, you know.
I agree completely. I think it's, as David said, if I'm with somebody and their cat died, or obviously if one of their relatives died, it's a totally different ball game. As sad as it is for somebody to lose a house, it is property and it can be rebuilt. Life and death is a totally different
Okay.
thing. Coming back from
Okay.
Ukraine,
So I
that's a
just found this
totally
because,
different ball
this
game.
is where, I don't know where it got the number that it
We got
got. I'm
Robert
looking
go.
at my,
Yeah.
Robert,
Robert.
mute yourself, Robert.
statement,
It's not
my
me.
statement for.
Oh, sorry, Robert.
Not
Sounded
me.
like Robert.
Technical stuff. Sounded like you.
What is it?
No,
Okay. So, but anyway, uh, uh, I don't know if am I still on?
Yeah, you are.
Okay. Okay. So no, I think it's a totally different ballgame when there's violence involved. That's when it's
Go to the credit card
heartbreaking.
and do that one first, 'cause that's,
It's a
that's
different
what
ball game when it's, I mean, people are just, there's so many positive stories from this, people working together, even, with these poor animals at the Pasadena Humane Society. People are working to save them. There's so much care. Whereas, when you see, not that I've been in that many war zones or conflict zones, maybe three or something, or one twice. Uh, that's a totally different feeling. And I'm sure for those that covered 9/11, uh, just a totally different ballgame. Doesn't mean you don't feel things here, but as David said, when it gets personal, like when I was with the person this morning that had a relative that was lost in Malibu, um, that's different. That's when you feel it more. But I don't think this is something necessarily that um, stays with you as something like in war, like the PTSD thing. I think with the people when you were talking with people, in New York after 9/11, that's something that's going to stick with you for a long time for sure. Or like Carol Guzzi, what she, saw. Oh yeah, look, there's somebody just wrote something about Iberian X, which is great. Now, there were a lot of great questions, which of course we can answer. We didn't have a chance during the and thank you. Somebody mentioned that there is a surfer that had passed away. I'm gonna look into that. I was not aware of that. And David, to answer your question, or Robert rather, I did use a flash for the shot of the Army and National Guard, and so I find flash fill very useful for portraiture in difficult lighting situations. But the key is I always try to get it off camera if I can. The flash, handheld flash, um, just to balance things, out a little bit. So if, answering that question. Um,
And so, what is the plan for you guys? Do you go back tomorrow? I mean, like, how does the workflow work for you guys? You check the weather, and I'm going in tomorrow, whether I have an assignment or not. How do you do it, David?
Yeah, it's a good question because after I finished that assignment for Dazit, I took 2 or 3 days off. I was spent emotionally, and I was physically tired because I was a little low on sleep. My girlfriend had been staying with me with her child and her dogs, and it was like so I just needed a break. And then I went out to the west side again because I hadn't really seen the PCH, but it was I found it was so bright and there was no definition in the sky. It didn't, I took some pictures, but I wanted to go back when there was a little bit more. I thought it was just the lighting conditions were a little bit more varied for me. And so I think I gave it one more try. It was sort of the same, but I'm keeping an eye on it.
I mean, that's sort of interesting, right? Like you're in the middle of this space, and it's still going on, but you have the stamina to sit back and say, I need a break. But within that break, you're really going through what you already shot.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, one of the advantages of either working for a news organization on assignment or not, is that you have to get your stuff out quickly. So fortunately, I didn't have a backlog of photos to go through. It's sort of like, I was done and with at least, my responsibility. So then at that point, I'm starting to think about, well, everybody's seen the pictures of the fire. They've seen more or less immediate aftermath. There are a lot of very interesting and compelling pictures of sort of like a week or two later. I love your stuff, Mark, from the Humane Society. I've seen it on Instagram, and it's so great that you were doing that. And then you see people who are volunteers who are doing things also. And to be honest, I just haven't had the kind of just the emotional strength to go and do that stuff without an assignment, because I think it's been pretty well covered by the people who are doing it.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking now about, okay, what is left to do photographically to take pictures now that are going to last, that people 20 or 50 years from now are going to be interested in seeing. And Mark, I think like that picture of Will Rogers' house is a perfect example of that. I mean, that's historical. That has been there for 100 years, right? Or something, whatever, almost. And 80, whatever. And so now it's gone. And that is an interesting picture that people are going to be looking at, a long time from now. So
Yeah,
I think
what are
that's
the,
sort of the mentality.
yeah, like David, what Mark, what are the markers for an event like this, right? Like what, like David was saying, like the Will Rogers house, what becomes that? What becomes that is the signature, moments of that fire, of that
Yeah.
event.
Well, I should say, first of all, I put my stuff out through Zuma Press. So that's where the stuff sort of lives for people to pick up. And so, and then, as I said, there was a great magazine assignment, and I had already committed to go into Rio. And so I ran down, and I just was not in the mindset there. I did what I had to do and then just ran back. But I should have done the Ron Haviv and just told them sorry. And actually, I did call to see if I could put it back. Okay, but in terms of markers, um, well, I think because LA is so famous for their the mountains that separate the valley and the city, and to have the tankers flying through. And that's where the fires really get going. So often when you talk about like fires in Los Angeles, they're really up in the hills. And so that's where that's where the real battle takes place. And if it makes it out of the mountains, that's when you have I don't know if carnage is the right word, because it was really more, uh, it was the properties that were destroyed. But it made it down into the flat areas. And so I think I know David Kennerly told me that he rented a helicopter for $1,000 and flew over. And so he did that in Guyana, with the Jim Jones thing many
Yeah.
years ago, his famous stuff. And so I think, a shot like that, to rent a helicopter and to do an aerial wide shot to show the magnitude, because one thing that you have on the news is often the news is a bit sensationalized, and something really is just happening in one area. It's not affecting everybody. This is different. This was so gigantic, and I think that the aerial point of view. So we're going to see years from now, I think, aerial shots to show the magnitude of it. And so whether, did I get a shot that, well, of course, shots of, with Malibu to show the water versus the homes right there are going to live on. But I think whoever got some aerial shots will have something that will really show. And there's going to be that opportunity for a while, because things aren't going to be built. It's going to take years for things to really get back to any semblance of what they were. It's just too massive. There's not enough people out there to fix everything. And then Jim just sent a note about, covering. I'm going to definitely, when we get off here, have to look and see what's going on there. And that might be something to get up early for, and go out to see what's going on there, because we're not out of it yet, right?
Right.
It's the conditions that caused. I mean, if we get the Santa Ana wins again, things can really start up in the Hollywood Hills. We sort of dodged a bullet. They had the Sunset Fire. that amazingly, because everybody was on hand, they quickly contained that.
I knew it was coming. Yeah.
Right. And crews were already here fighting the other fires, and so they were able to have a quick response. Especially the aerial. Once again, if it's super windy and they can't fly, and that's what happened at the beginning. Um,
Yeah. Let me read this comment.
okay.
I'm curious if either of you have a point of view on the recent controversy over AI generated video of the wildfires that were posted without disclosure that it was AI. I'm sure examples tied to other events are on the rise as well. While there are reasons to support the technology for certain purposes, there seems a pretty clear example of the slippery slope in the context of photojournalism.
Yeah.
For sure.
Right, Deb wrote
100%.
that.
Yeah, I mean anybody who I mean that's why there's that video. It looks like a couple of kids are taking out tanks of or cans of gasoline.
Yeah,
Somebody's
yeah.
yelling at them. I don't know if that's real or fake. We can't take it at face value. And I haven't really done my due diligence to know. But if you just, but you know, these things are so believable when you see them, and people don't do deep dives anymore. You know, they just hear something it used to be when we had Walter Cronkite, you could
Uh-huh.
believe the guy, right? Yeah, when he said the Vietnam War was lost or over or whatever, you might want to believe
The
him. But
nation believed.
instead of just a bunch of talking heads, and everybody has an opinion. And so AI is an extension of that lack of depth, just and people playing around. And
Perfectly said, Mark.
yeah,
Perfectly said.
it was a very dangerous thing. And so what AI might be great for a lot of things, but in terms of and with all these social media platforms, and now that any guardrails have been removed, in terms of fact checking and all that.
Mm.
So that combination of people not doing a deep dive,
And the technology.
ooh, that's a dangerous,
Yeah,
dangerous
that's right.
combination.
Yeah, I mean, this is a whole other projections night of conversation,
Yeah.
But I think it's about a year ago, Leica came out with a camera it was the first one that has a chip in it that I happen to use and kind of like help them promote. That's from something that Adobe is kind of adopting and has come up with a technology called the Content Authenticity Initiative. And it basically puts a stamp, like an encrypted watermark,
Yep.
okay, that puts in metadata that's beyond any other metadata data in your images that you're used to using, and that will allow just ordinary viewers on if the news platforms are using this to then click on an image, a video, or even a bit of sound, and then
Yep.
look and find out what the origin of that is, so they can suss out what's fake and what's not, or what may have started out as something that was real but then has been manipulated and it's changed that original true bit of image or footage. So I've been actually very uh well, I don't know if surprise is the right word, but I felt fairly positive about the mainstream news organizations, the newspapers and the large television networks and those news sites have, I think, been pretty good about maintaining, kind of being gatekeepers for these sort of false, um, you know, uh, you know, pieces of material that people are putting out, that, like, if you're just scrolling through Twitter, X, or whatever, you're going to see a bunch of just crap that people have made up, and it's unfiltered, and there's no one's going through it. But
No cake there,
people who are who have the intention and are sophisticated enough to get most of their information from traditional news sites, I think, fortunately, that they're still holding up some standards.
yeah. So if anyone else has any other questions, you could put it in the chat room. I have to tell you guys, if you look through the chat room, you see a lot of wonderful comments about your presentations. So
I see. Yeah, I see one question that says, "Do you still need to press past again as the Marys?" Yes, yes, you do.
You do. Okay.
Yeah.
They're closing. It's interesting. The area, like driving down this morning or up to Malibu, they keep where at one point it was at Bundy and Sunset, then they moved it. They keep moving it. They're shrinking that area that you can't go. But once it hits the real fire areas, then forget it. So either you have
Mm.
an LA, and they check it, and it has to be a real LAPD or sheriff's pass, and then they're just turning people around, and you have the National Guard there as well. I heard Altadena is really quickly opening, but I'm not
Mm.
sure how much, if that means that the actual heavy fire area, but definitely Sunset Boulevard, uh, from like the Riviera Country Club on, I don't think without a press credential you can do it. And you just definitely can't do PCH from like the California Incline to well into where the Malibu fire
Yeah.
extended.
It's an interesting thing. Like, I mean, of course, you want to go back to see your property, what's left of it, right? So, but other than I don't know, some kind of peaceful moment to see your house, it's gone, right?
Mhm.
Maybe what they can do is they can do it, at a certain time. Open it up so the people can come and see it, so that piece is over because they've got to start getting trucks in there to get rid of everything,
Oh no, no,
Mm.
no, no! There are plenty of those
no,
vehicles,
no, I'm just
doing
saying,
their
like, because
work. Yeah.
people need. I think people do need some type of closure,
Oh, for sure.
right? And go there with their families, with their kids, whatever they have to do,
Yeah.
because they've got to start getting rid of everything, right? I mean, my God, what an enormous step. And like your images there, David, of somebody finding something, right? I mean, that's like magical for them,
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
right? I mean, in some way,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if
Yeah.
they're going to first set up escorts going in,
yeah.
because the danger is the looky-loos.
Oh, right. The air is still toxic. That's a great point,
Well,
Amy.
but not only the look-loos that will bottleneck stuff, but unfortunately especially in the high-end areas, but looters. That is unfortunately a real possibility, though we haven't seen it widespread.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If you open the floodgates, then people can sort of mix in, and there would be that, and so that's enough of a tragedy already,
Yeah.
to lose stuff. But as David said, the amazing thing is that the houses that started to burn, the fire department was so overwhelmed they just had to let it burn, and so either you have a house that's very few houses are partially uh,
Mhm, mhm. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
destroyed. They're really just burned. Isn't it amazing to see how much they're burned? That there's just so. In fact, my friend Kelly, who lost her house up in Malibu, I said I would go through and look and see if I could find any. There was nothing. Absolutely
Just
nothing.
nothing there. Oh,
Nothing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think in terms of returning to some of those neighborhoods, I have read that that if you show ID that shows that you do live in the neighborhood, that's one way that the authorities are able to sort out who should
Yeah.
be going in and who shouldn't. So yeah, that seems to, it seems to make
Amy's
sense.
got an incredible comment. In Palisades, there was a couple of people who tried to enter with a fire truck they had purchased at a sale.
Wow. Well, one of the things that
Wow.
I did see, and I didn't end up showing these pictures because they're not that interesting and I wasn't really there for some key moments, but I was in the first day of my Dizet assignment. I was in a neighborhood where people, there were maybe, I don't know, just on one street, maybe there's like 20 or 30 families or something. It wasn't that dense, but they hired a private firefighting crew
Mhm.
at tremendous expense. Like I mean, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars a day. Okay. So there were examples of, and those crews they are able to get in. So this was like after the fires had already come through, but they were worried about a second round. So some of the
Mm.
residents, like they pooled resources and hired these crews to come in. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
So you do sort of see some stuff like that.
Mark, I'd love to go back with you. I know that's a dream, but that would be incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rob had a question before. I don't think that zip code gets you mobile homes. You know,
No, actually,
see, I'm wrong.
yeah,
There are.
up at Malibu Village.
Wow.
I don't know if that's 100% a a mobile home area, but it's very much like it. And that's where the Buddha was burning. So it's not quite the trailers that you move in and out. But I know that in another fire up there, there's several enclaves. And David, you might know
Yeah.
of one. But
Yeah.
I think there are actually some in Malibu.
Oh
Number.
yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, that was the one that I showed that was completely wiped out. It was, I think, 100% kind of a mobile home park.
Yeah,
Yeah, there you
And
go.
I know it's sort of counterintuitive, but I know that even along the coast, like I mean, I myself have looked into this, just for myself, like in Orange County. Um, and so you have to own your home and they're probably already there, right? But then you pay like a couple of $1,000s a month in rent to live there in addition to your home. But yeah, they're up there. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
there's Tahitian Terrace Mobile Home Park in the Palisades. They were
yeah,
completely destroyed.
yeah.
I looked it up after I asked the question, and there
Hmm.
there were mobile home parks that were completely decimated.
Yeah, and Laredo also. Wow. Okay, there you go. We learn things here as also. We
Yeah.
see and learn.
Yes, for sure.
Uh, yeah. So, I thank you guys so much for doing this. Why don't each of you give us a farewell address and send us off for the evening?
Okay, well, I'll just say, first of all, I really appreciate Frank and Jay having me back, and it's an honor to share the dais, if that's the way to say it, with David. And I'm going to continue doing stories, follow-up stories with the
Right.
with the Palisades in Palisades, and also with the animals. Um, in the Pasadena area. So if anybody, I put my Instagram up there. It's just my full name, Mark Edward Harris, but I add photo. There's another Mark Edward Harris out there, but it's a Mark Edward Harris photo, so you'll see more. And I've got to go through the old stuff because there's a lot. Like I photographed the prisoners on the line, fighting the fires. I am very slow. I'm too slow at going through my images, and that's I've been told by Scott many times at Zuma. He says, "Come on,
Let's go.
covering the Olympics, I'm famous for covering yesterday's news, maybe, or because only 'cause stuff takes that long. So I get a few good ones in quickly, but that's the way it is. But thank you everybody for tuning in. I very much appreciate it.
Yeah, and of course, Mark, we have a standing invitation whenever you're finally ready to show us the rest of the work. We're here. We'd love to, of course, love to have you back.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
You know that.
Appreciate
David?
Yeah, again, thank you, Frank, for hosting. Jay, for your work under the hood, keeping the machine running. And I think it's a great thing that you're doing, Frank, on such a variety of topics, and it keeps people engaged. From the photo stand, for us as photographers, and then viewers who are just interested. So again, thank you. Thanks for everybody for joining, Mark. Pleasure to be with you. And yeah, I didn't have a fancy QR code like Mark did with his IG feed, but my name is David Butow, Butow, and it's kind of a weird name, and I'm the only one. So I think so. You can find me at David Butow on Instagram and Blue Sky Social as well. So thank you all.
Yeah, you guys are great. And everyone, probably within a week or so, this will be up on YouTube, so you can see that for anyone. And when you go there, subscribe to our page, our channel. So I appreciate that. And tomorrow night we have two more wonderful photojournalists that David sent my way, which is great. So if you're available tomorrow, same time, same bat channel. You know that reference, right, David? Bat channel?
I sure do. Yes, in fact, this is a little anecdote. I went to two houses, one of them which was still standing that had been occupied by people who played Batman. Like, I'm not kidding. One was Adam,
Really?
yeah, Adam, I forget his last name, and the other was a different Batman. But yes. Maybe it was Christian Bale. Yeah, it was Christian
Adam
Bale.
West?
That's it.
The West.
Adam West. Thank you. Yeah,
Adam
yeah,
West.
yeah.
Wow.
Running
Wow.
around in tights, right?
Yeah, in his cape. Yeah. I think Valerie Pez says it best. How courageous of you two for covering such a tragedy. Thank you. So everyone, we'll be here tomorrow night. I thank you guys both so much, and Jay for doing this with us, and we'll see you tomorrow night.